Welcome back to this episode of Liftoff Journeys. I'm your host, Jeannie Walden, and I am joined today with the Jimmy Fallon of payroll, as he's been called, Mr. Mike Baer. Mike, thanks for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Jeannie, for having me.
So Mike's laughing, but if you've spent any time with Mike Baer at a payroll event, then you're very lucky because every time I've been at a payroll event with Mike, there have been lines of people waiting to talk to him, asking him when they can get some time with him, and just finding different ways to engage with him. It's really fabulous. So I'm really excited about today's conversation, Mike, to learn more about your journey, how you ended up in payroll, how you got to be so popular in payroll, and the person that everybody wants to spend time with and be around. And also, other things that we might not know about you yet that would help the audience become inspired as they're working on their journeys. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Well, so Mike and I met each other, gosh, about 5 years ago, over a phone call right before the pandemic. And both of our lives were changed after that as Mike and I had the opportunity to work together. And I really got to appreciate learning from Mike the impact that you can have in people's lives if you're just really good at your job and a really good person. So I guess, Mike, my first question for you is, were you raised to be a great person and just always do the right thing and pay it forward? Or is that something you learned over the course of your career?
I'd like to say it's a little bit of both because I think there's environment and there's the nature part of it. I think there's some innateness to it, and but then also, I mean, my folks taught me to just be honest and be a straight shooter, and I've told you that before. I was like, look, I'm kind of a straight shooter, Jeannie. This is how I feel
Yeah.
about this. So. And I think it served me well for the most part. There probably been some times where, it set me back a little bit, but I'd rather be the straight shooter and handle those setbacks than try to throw some curves at people. You know what I'm saying? It's just not.
Absolutely.
It's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. You know me, I'm tell it like it is kind of person. And I feel like, that's really important because people know then they can trust you and that your authenticity is always coming through so that you can understand and represent exactly what you need to in business. But let's talk about business. When you were little, did you get a cash register or a checkbook for Christmas and decided that payroll is where you want to be? What did you think you were going to be when you were 5 or 6 years old?
Well, I got to say, it's well known in the payroll industry, of payroll professionals, that, no one ever dreamed of becoming a payroll professional. I'm sorry, it just isn't something people aspire to when they're 5 or 6 years old. I did have one of those quarter slot things that I was enamored with, where you just load the quarters in and you dispense them. This takes people back, but back in the day when people they were like little change things you could wear on your belt, and I did enjoy having one of those for a time. I think I traded it for something else, but at any rate, no. I mean, the path to payroll for everybody, and including me, is kind of circuitous. It's not a direct line because people don't just really think of this as something that they want to do. Of course, younger, I want to be president of the United States, and then I wanted to do business with China, and I did do some of that. I was very pleased to be able to, get the degree and go overseas and work for a time. And but one of the reasons I got into payroll was because of my graduate studies. I needed a part-time job, and so I found a part-time job in the want ads back then as a payroll clerk, and so that kind of started my payroll journey right there. They had just moved payroll into HR at the time, and so I got to learn a lot of HR as well. and in addition to being the payroll clerk. And it was right in a pivotal moment in kind of payroll technology where they were just starting to automate timekeeping. And I pointed that period now as being really a change maker for payroll and also human capital management in general. Because once they could capture that time data, the schedules as well as the time worked, and then also provide reports on that, that's data. And that's what's really important now. That to me is like the foundation of human capital management, is to monitor the time and see what's going on with people's time, and see trends and things like that. So I was fortunate to be involved in that right at the beginning, to be kind of like a guinea pig in a way for some of these automated timekeeping systems. But I also was fortunate to learn a lot about HR, and I learned about employment. I ended up actually working when I worked overseas. I worked overseas in China. I was the HR manager over there for one of the three at the time foreign-owned properties in China. Actually, they called it personnel manager. It was an international hotel chain, well known. And so I was able to work overseas, which is what I desired to do at the time. And then when I came back, there was a little thing that happened called Tiananmen, and it was very tragic at the time. And my wife and I had already made plans to come back to the States anyway, but that kind of changed my career a bit, from wanting to do international trade, international business, because it was going to be China centered, and with everything that happened there, I didn't feel comfortable pursuing that. So what I ended up doing was getting a job with a very reputable publishing firm, legal publishing firm. They call it legal. I think I love the joke, it's like, well, we're glad it's not illegal, right? Yeah. But what they did was they grabbed regulations and laws and published them, and also put context around them for people in business and tax, so that they could understand what's going on in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., in Congress primarily. And they were just starting a payroll administration guide, and they just started launching it, and I was there, and I got picked up, and the rest is history. I was managing editor of those publications, and I saw the transformation there of it going from print to what used to be CDs, right? And DVDs, and then on the web, and then so many transformations on the web as well. And we were able to grow our coverage to all the states and localities. And I was able to, and I'm very proud of it, launch a global payroll support network of all kinds of resources for 90 plus countries. So by the time I left there, I mean, it was a career. Let's put it that way. It's been a great career. But what happened is that, my experience in payroll paid off, because I had done that payroll clerk. I'd done paymaster duties, but I'd also done the HR, and they were looking for someone who had hands-on experience early on to help guide the publication, so that they could meet the needs of the subscribers. And
That's
they did.
fascinating. Yeah, I love that. So you just said something super important there, that, you know, in the beginning, you did a lot of hands-on work and just a lot of basic work to get by and just learn the trade and start at the bottom and move up, and that paid off for you, because then in more of a leadership role, people were looking for somebody who had that frontline experience. So I guess it, proves that all of those early jobs that we have when we're starting our careers really make a difference in helping us get to more senior careers as we grow.
That's so true, Jeannie. I mean, I think with you can always draw on those experiences, even if they weren't positive ones, and draw something positive out of them that you can use later on. I truly believe in that.
Yeah, I think so too. I was at a conference one time sitting next to a woman, and they said, tell us about the biggest mistake you made at work and what you learned from it. And she said, I don't believe that I've ever made a mistake at work. And I think the whole room was like, really? What? How can you say that? But she said, I think everything I've done has just been an opportunity to learn how to do things differently. And I don't think that I would call them mistakes. I think that I would call them learning opportunities. And I think that changed my perspective from there, although I'm pretty sure that I've made a few mistakes over the
Yeah,
years that
there
I
are.
can't call opportunities. So.
You're triggering a flood of learning opportunities on my end right now. Several of them where, in interviews, I told you I was a straight shooter where I was like, you know, well, I had this problem with somebody and I just hung up on them. I remember saying that in one interview. I was like, why did you say that? You didn't really
Yeah.
have to share that with them.
Well, that's the, not so positive side about being a straight shooter all the time. You might have a little TMI there, but it's fascinating to hear how your journey changed. You started out school with one idea in mind, but you did that. You accomplished what your goals were.
A good
So have you
part of
always,
it. Yeah, a good part of it.
yeah,
And so it was great.
have,
Yeah.
do you feel that you've always been goal driven?
Yeah, I remember when I was in graduate school and I was working as this in payroll and HR and running into somebody at a cocktail party and I was telling them what I wanted to do. And he was like, "Man, you've got aspirations. A lot of people don't have, can't grab onto that really well." And I think another thing, this is an interesting thing that I think before we started this podcast, we had been talking a little bit about people's journey and that some people are just driven to a particular type of work. And when I was in the hotel industry, I really witnessed that. Folks in the hotel industry, there are some very devoted, and this is it kind of thing. I mean, you don't really get that for payroll until you're in payroll, where people are like, okay, yeah, this, how did I know this was it? But in other professions, you get that. Well, I never really had that in hotel and in the hospitality industry. I was great at what I did. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed working with all the people, and that was one of the beautiful things about HR is that every day is different, and and you get to work in so many different ways. It's just a wonderful opportunity. But at the same time, I have always felt like I never had that same commitment as some of these other hoteliers, that are just like, this is it for me. This is my career and I love it. And it's true in a whole bunch of other professions. I never quite grabbed that in any particular field, I have to say. But I always felt like I could be really good at some of these things. I'm not good at everything, but I could be really good at some of these things and excel at several of them, and then also be satisfied with that. I have to say I'm pretty happy with the turns and in my career because it's been quite a satisfying kind of journey.
So do you feel like when you got into the payroll industry that was your aha moment and you said, wow, this is where I belong?
No, no, I didn't. I
So
spent,
you're still searching.
well, okay, so there are a couple factors there, Jeannie, and one is kind of like more on a professional level. It's kind of like when you get in a position, I always feel like I'm kind of trying to work my way out of the job. I want to I want to get in that position, but then I don't want to kind of stay there forever. I want to kind of work my ways and bring people up, help develop talent so that I can move on, and then other
Mhm.
people can slide in, and those kind of things. So that's the thing on the professional level. Now, when it comes to, on a kind of like aspirational level of what you want to do, I've just always felt that I could be happy doing a lot of different things, and as long as I put my mind to it, and I can really feel like I'm contributing positively to something. That's basically what I need. I think in my
Yeah.
career, is something like that. And I felt that way when I was working with you, Jeannie, and I felt that way
Mhm.
before when I was in the publishing business.
This is Prospire's Soaring to New Health podcast. I'm your co-host, Chris Mladenovic.
And I'm your co-host, Dan Krogan. Whether you work in the payer or provider side of the healthcare industry, or are a client or a friend of Prospire, you're sure to learn something new every month when you tune in.
Yeah. So, where do you think your journey is going to take you next?
Well, this is pretty exciting because I am transitioning right now, and it's a wonderful opportunities for me because one of the reasons I left that publishing was because hey, I've had a great career here. I just feel like I've done all that I could, and it was a great organization that I work with. But what I really want to do, if I'm going to do anything else, I need to start it now. And I was
Yeah.
able to start that and start working in a different field, but still related to payroll, which was wonderful for me because then I could stay in touch with all those people that I was able to network with as I was building the products that we were working on in the publishing area, and then also leverage those that and also my knowledge to help the company that we were with, really enhance its brand and enhance the position of the products in that marketplace. And it was very fulfilling. So now I'm looking for, generally another kind of forward-looking company that could use services in terms of consulting or communication and marketing. I learned a lot in my last position on the marketing side. I did do a lot of marketing for the publication that publishing firm that I was at, but nothing like what I learned of the last few years where I was before. And I can leverage those things and help companies achieve a level of visibility in a marketplace that is really kind of, let's just say, skeptical about new things. And payroll has always been kind of very cautious about taking on new things and moving in new areas, and for a good reason, because it's a
So,
super critical function.
So what are your thoughts on payroll potentially moving into the crypto space? Because, payroll, big changes in payroll have included things like direct deposit and pay cards and, other types of advancements. There's a lot of talk, debate about should you pay your employees in crypto or not crypto, the stability of it. Do you have any thoughts in that area?
I sure do. I definitely do because I mean we've been steeped in payments for the last few years. Now payments, you got to remember, there are ends of payroll, and payment is right at the very last part of the payroll process. But it's super critical as we've seen recently with the banking crisis and how funding is so important. But that's only one aspect of payments. So payments by itself is like a whole kind of field, and employee payments is another one. So one of the things I've observed, and this is how I approach things, is like I'm this observer now of all these things going on. When it comes to virtual currencies or cryptocurrencies, however you want to call it, it's going to be kind of what the employees want. And it's not going to be driven like direct deposit was, where employees had to be convinced to take up a direct deposit as opposed to getting a paper check. Employers drove that, and businesses drove that. This is somewhat being driven by businesses, but I think the biggest factor is going to be, will employees, individuals, embrace the cryptocurrency enough so that they're going to tell their employers, hey, I want to be paid this way. I want to be paid in this currency. So payroll is already dealing with that to a certain extent, and has traditionally dealt with that with overseas workers, people wanting to have half their pay. I remember when I was overseas, I had, a certain amount of my pay in US dollars and a certain amount of pay in Chinese. And so it was that way before. This is another type of currency. Certainly payroll can enable it and handle it. One of the challenges with the crypto, of course, is the stability of that those currencies, and also kind of the power hungry way that those amounts are generated. So there's a couple of factors going against crypto, kind of more on the infrastructure side. But I think once you see employees embrace that as a bona fide, valid way to get paid, they're going to demand that from employers. Kind of like employers are demanding now on-demand pay, for example, or earned wage access. So employees are going out of their way now and saying, hey, I want to work and I want to be able to access my pay on demand. It's going to be
What
the same
about
kind of thing.
what about vendors? Do you ever envision a world where the supply company wants to get paid in crypto, or the facilities company wants to get paid in crypto?
I have not thought about that too much, so I don't know if I
Yeah.
can really give you a great answer to that. Just off the, kind of off the cuff answer is, again, it's going to be, the demand for it. Is this better than getting paid in fiat currency?
Yeah.
And right now we don't know where that's heading. I don't think.
Well, it's a journey of its own kind for sure, right?
It definitely is, and it's again, for payroll, it's just one of these little pieces, these little things, and it's like, oh yeah, the mayor of New York wants to get paid in virtual currency, but can we do that? And there are challenges with that in payroll, because there's translation risks, just like there are with transaction and translation risks in converting the dollars to whatever currency, just like when you're paying an overseas employee.
Yeah, very interesting. So, Mike, if you had to give one piece of advice to somebody who was just starting out their career, what would you give them? What would you say?
Well, I would say you need to be true to your values. I think is one of the key issues. So first, you got to be true to yourself. I do have some experiences with my father had experiences where he was working for some people that, he was not comfortable with how they operated. But he still worked with them because he had a growing family and things like that. And a lot of people are put in that situation. But I think if you're true to your values, then that is a great way to kind of kick off your career, is look for those organizations that mesh with what your values are, and be honest. I think being honest and being accountable are some great traits that, unfortunately, in the modern age, tend to get overlooked sometimes by, flash and sizzle.
So true. So if you were going to give advice to somebody that had been working for a while, maybe 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20 years or longer, that was transitioning, would you still give them the same advice or would you say something different?
Well, I think the value advice is going to be going all the way through, and the honesty. Those are just kind of core things that you have to retain, because once you lose the trust, you've lost a lot of what a lot of what your own capital is. You bring a lot of capital to an organization. You can bring social capital, and you can bring your skills, which is that kind of capital. And it's great to have the skills, but I think you got to stick with those values, value driven, what's innate in you, because once you go off track, it's very difficult to get that back, and I've witnessed that too. So I would say, yeah, if they're in 10, 15 years and they want to transition, uh, I would say before you leave your current job to go do it, you need to do some exploring, and then also make sure that these companies that you're looking for, or wherever you're going to work, whatever organization it is, it might be a government organization, but just make sure that it is in sync with your values, and allows you to be your authentic self.
Oh my gosh, Mike, thanks so much for being a guest on Lift Off Journeys today. If people want to continue the conversation with you, how can they get in touch?
Well, there's a couple of ways, and I want to thank you first, Jeannie, for having me on Liftoff Journeys. But I can be reached. I have a Gmail email. It's mtbear511.5 at gmail.com. But I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, Papa Bear 5. So please look me up on those social media platforms as well.
Great. If you're in
Thank
the
you
payroll
again.
space, absolutely. If you're in the payroll space, if you're interested in talking about journeys, transitions, if you want to talk about working in China, there's so many things that we could talk to you about, Mike. So I'm sure the audience is going to be in touch. And for everybody listening, stay tuned for our next guest, because if you thought Mike was great, you're going to be blown away by our next guest. And you'll have to tune in to see what I mean.